But anyway, like I said, I've been told Mr. LeBounty does great work, so you might check him out. Okay, so we start talking about escape wheel repair. I'm gonna teach you how to straighten escape wheel teeth if we have any that are bent. Also gonna teach you how we're gonna check for trueness by turning it on the lathe. We're gonna ensure that the escape wheel is concentric, meaning whenever I'm running it and I'm watching, I'm not only watching for wobble like this on the profile, but I'm also gonna be checking it on its face to make sure it's not doing this number. You know, not a bent pivot, but actually the escape wheel being out of round, being non-concentric. So we want to check for that. I'm going to show you how to properly bush the escapement before adjusting. And I think it was Mark had asked if I would cover that whenever we were in this repair, or somebody had, and I told you I would when we do the bushing part. This is actually going to be a part of this. I'm going to talk about it, and then when I do the hands-on demonstration of doing bushings, I will actually do what I'm going to teach you here in just a second. I'll show you it doing the hands-on part. So this pair of pliers right here is what I would recommend having for doing the escape wheel repairs that we're going to talk about. This is just an extra long pair of needle nose pliers like this. In fact, that picture is this pair of pliers. That's the ones I actually use. These are, believe it or not, they're Popular Mechanics brand whenever Walmart used to carry that brand. But Lowe's has their Cobalt line, and Cobalt makes a good set too, which I have up here. The only difference is, I don't know how well you can tell, but the very tip of it, I've actually taken a file and thinned it down because it was a little too thick for some of the escape wheels. So I just took a file and dressed it down a little bit to make it a little thinner. But if you can find a pair that's got the shaping like this, versus you can see how thin that is compared to the other one, find you a pair that's this thin. I don't know if you can even find the Popular Mechanics brands tools anymore, but if you can, these are great. These are what I usually use. Okay, now this pair here is one that Mr. LeBounty actually made himself. He took a regular pair of square jaw pliers, kind of like these, other than their smooth jaw. Mine have the teeth on the inside for gripping, but it's just a regular old school pair of flat jaw pliers, just like that. And what he did was, you can see where the lines are at right here. All this material here he removed, and then all this material here on the outside of that line he moved. So he basically made like a set of duck bills on it. So when he got done, it looked like that. So again, we go back to what we talked about on I believe it was the first night, where necessity is the mother of invention. You know, we make our own tools when we need to. That's what he did in this case. He made a pair of pliers work for what he needed it to do. So then here's a side-by shot that he included with the pair before and then after he got done. So you can really see where he removed that material off the outside and then rounded the nose off rather than it being a square spun off nose. Okay, so on the left, you're going to see a badly mangled escape wheel. You can see there's all kinds of bent teeth. These are definitely bent. You got several bent ones right through here. And then the one on the right is a straightened one after we've fixed the issue. Now, in reality, this was before, this was after, because I took this escape wheel and I did this to it for the purposes of the picture. But I have, believe it or not, I have had escape wheels come in this bad where these many teeth were actually bent and got them back to straight to looking like they should. It's time consuming and it's tedious work, but it's not hard. I mean, once you take the time to straighten it, you should be able to get pretty, unless there's teeth missing or, you know, half the tooth has been broke off, there should be no reason why you can't fix an escape wheel. Now, I did have one, it was off of a Ansonia, real nice Ansonia onyx cased clock, and it had the exposed escapement on the front. So it was a brocat escapement, and it had the teeth were not the wedge shape like this. They were kind of a cutout and then come down. I'm sure you've probably seen them. And then they used the pin pallets on it. The guy that owned the clock brought it in and said, I screwed up. I was like, okay. So I got to looking at it. What he had done was, for whatever reason, was messing with the verge with the movement still in the clock and under full spring power. Well, on those brocat escapements, there's an anchor-looking piece on the front, and that's actually the part that holds the whole assembly together. He had taken those 2 screws out, removed that, and pulled the verge back. Of course, that escape wheel starts going 900 miles an hour. So instead of reaching his finger in there and, gently bringing it to a stop, he jams the verge back into the escape wheel. Manages to snap the wheel, and I've got one just like it right here. Looks just like this. You see how those teeth are shaped? But whenever he did that, it went knocked out a chunk from that spoke to that spoke. Took that in complete section out, broke it out, just by putting the verge back in while it was going full speed. So luckily, I had one of these escape wheels here in my little cabinet. In fact, it was almost identical to this one here. It was just a little bit bigger on the diameter. But luckily, I had one, and I was able to put a new one in it and send him on his way. Of course, he learned a very valuable lesson. You don't ever do that. So he goes, next time I have an issue like that, I'm just bringing it to you. I said, oh, okay, that works. So let me get us back over to the presentation. There we go. All right. So next slide. Okay, this is a magnified view of a couple of teeth that have gotten hit. You can tell they're kind of bent right there at the tip, and there's a little bit of a hookie right there. But this is the kind of stuff you're going to run into. This isn't real bad damage. In fact, you may not really notice it a whole lot unless you had your optivisors, or in this case, like you got it under a magnifying glass and actually saw that the tips were slightly bent. So we really want to take a good look, because a lot of times if there's an issue with the clock, with like going in and out of beat, not wanting to regulate properly, stuff like that, one of the first places I'm going to look is at the escapement. Hopefully it's the last place you ever have to do an adjustment, but it's usually one of the first places I look, just to make sure it's not bent teeth, something along those lines. So we really want to check this escape wheel and the verge real carefully when we're doing our repairs.
Justin?
Sir.
Do you have some kind of stationary magnifier that you use in order to do these kinds of inspections?
Yeah, if I need one that's a little steadier than my optivisor, I've got one of these. It's actually for soldering, but it's got the 2 arms with the alligator clips, so I can mount the gear in there. Of course, I haven't used it so long, my lens is dirty, but I can mount it up in there. Let's say if I'm working on this one, I'm going to take, and what's nice about this is you can manipulate these arms pretty much any direction you need to. You just got to adjust the parts and the pieces out. But I can take this, and I can either use one or both, whichever, but I can just mount it up in there like that, and then I can move this part in and out to increase it or decrease it. And I don't know if you could even tell. You can see how it's magnified. That way I can just set that right on the bench, and I can look. And if I need to make little minute adjustments or do something to it, like if I got like a little spot on the tip of the tooth and I want to just take a file to it real quick, I can have my hands free to do that and be watching it the entire time. So yeah, if you need a steady way to do it, this would be the way to do it. You can get these at Harbor Freight. Time Savers has them. I mean, I think I actually got this one at Harbor Freight, and they're like maybe $5, no more than 10. I guarantee you they're not over 10.
Do you have something that you mount on your lathe, like what is in the photograph there?
No, I do not. I actually would like to get they have a magnifier mount where you can put like the binocular style, or you could use a single too, but the microscope to put on there. I think that would be very handy. In fact, before I sold my Shoreline to Jonathan, I actually thought about doing that, getting the mount and having it for fine work. But fortunately, knock on wood, I haven't really had to have a job where I actually needed, should have had it. But, there have been times it probably would have been handier to do than just using the optivisor or that thing. So
Hey, Keith,
I've gotten by without it.
Last year, Keith, I bought an amp scope. If you're familiar with amp scope, with an articulating arm that goes over the lathe, and It's like 100x or something. It's an outrageous amount.
Yep.
And it's
Okay.
really useful in that kind of stuff.
They've got them now
Am-
where it's basically a camera that you can zoom in, and you can just have it here on your laptop and just zoom right in there.
And mine's got a camera and the
You're gonna be
LED
looking,
circle
but
as
you know, you
well.
can do your
You know,
stuff.
light circle and that kind of stuff.
Yep. Very cool.
Nice. Nice. Can you send us some information about that, please,
Sure.
sir?
How about that last year after taking a lathe course?
All right. So this picture here, you can see inside the circle, the tooth is bent, and it's bent sideways rather than being bent over on itself. It's actually bent to the side. I honestly, I don't see this a whole lot. I mean, I have seen it, but most of the time, if I have bent teeth, it's bent going with the teeth this way rather than on its side bent over. But you will see it. A lot of times, it's where somebody's worked on it and dropped it, or again, the guy with the verge shoved it back in there, and at best, it would have been bent like this. But of course, his, for whatever reason, I'm assuming a weak spot in the brass, it just knocked the entire chunk out. So you will see this, and we'll have to make a repair on this, or bend it back into place. So here he's showing how he used that same pair of pliers that he made, and he's just bending the tooth. Now, if you're bending tooth by tooth, you definitely want to use the pair of pliers. But if you have, let's say, the entire section of the escape wheel, let's say this is like in between these two spokes on this, that somehow has gotten, the entire section has gotten bent over, then you're going to want to have a bigger set of pliers. A little thin tip isn't going to work, so you're going to want something more like these, but with always use smooth jaw, so that way you're not scarring up the brass. In fact, I've got a pair right here that's the square jaw pliers, and they're smooth. These are actually from the Mac Tools. This is out of a set that I've got. My standard tools, I just robbed these out of it because I don't use it for anything in the automotive stuff. So, but those are good. And you can get away with needle nose ones too. The main thing is just make sure you have smooth jaws. So I've got this pair. It's our standard set of needle nose pliers, but they're, again, smooth jaw, no teeth on the inside to scar up the brass. And then if it's the entire wheel has been somehow cocked on there, if it's bent like this, you can just use your fingers to straighten that up. You really need the pliers when you're doing a section or you're going tooth by tooth. But if it's just bent on there or it's cocked on the hub, you just, like he's doing in the picture, just manhandle it back into place, spin it and check it, and just do that until you get it straightened out.
Typically, you do that on a lathe, or you just do that as you were doing it on your.
I do it on the lathe. That way, whenever I do my bend, and I'll just take my hand and I'll hand spin the lathe, because you want to do it at a slow RPM. That way you can see exactly where that bend's at. Now, once you get it to where you think you got it pretty straight, then you can turn the lathe on and run it at a lower speed so you can watch it just like it would be going when it's running. But yeah, I do my repairs just like he's got in the picture there. I do it on the lathe. Now, the one repair I will do that I don't do on the lathe is this one. I'll pull it out to pull the teeth. You can tell, and yes, we're going to do dental work. We're going to pull some teeth. So what we're doing is we're taking our pliers, and I want to get my good pair here, and I'll do all this on the hands-on too. But I'm taking my escape wheel, and we're just going in and we're grabbing the individual tooth. And as I'm squeezing, and you can tell by the arrows indicated on the slide itself, he's squeezing, but at the same time, he's also pulling. So I'm going to squeeze and I'm going to pull that out. And what that does is, number one, we're straightening the teeth. But if I have one that, say, the very tip of it's been knocked off, I can actually stretch that brass back out to extend the length of the tooth, as long as it's not too much. If just barely the tip has been knocked off, I can actually manipulate that brass to where I can draw the tooth back out to its proper length. And then I would come back and I would, even it out to make sure it's the same as all the other teeth. And we'll cover that here in just a second on the slides. So after we're done pulling the teeth, let's say I had an issue where the wheel wasn't concentric. Let's say I had this section right here between these two spokes has been bent in somehow, or it came from the factory that way. It's not quite in round. It's slightly out of round. What he's doing here is he's using a brass hammer And the one I have, the one I use, is just this little one. I actually got this at Harbor Freight. It comes in a set that you can change out different ends. Like this one's got the ball peen on it. It comes with an actual ball peen. This is more like a rounded over tip. And then it comes with a ball peen tip. And then comes with a straight peen tip. But the only reason why I have this is I use the brass face on it, and I use it for this function right here. What he's doing is he's laying it on a piece of steel or whatever. If you've got a little jeweler's vise, like what I've got right there, hopefully you can see that little bitty vise. You'll usually have an anvil face right on the back side of it. You can use that, or what I use is I use this. It's just a solid block of steel. It's a striking steel. It's heavy too. So I'll just lay that on the bench, and I'll put that escape wheel on there just like that, just like he's got his in the picture, and I'll perform this function on this right here. But what he's doing is, if you'll notice by the arrow, he's not coming straight down. He's actually doing glancing blows like this. And what he's doing is he's just like in blacksmith work, he's drawing the material out. He's using that hammer to manipulate the brass out to get that section between the spokes back out to round if it's been flattened out for some reason. So that's one repair that you may have to run into and may have to do. Fortunately, I've only had do it.
I think the term for that is called planishing. Is that right?
Yeah, planishing. Yep.
Okay.
So fortunately, in the entire time I've been doing repairs, I've only had 2 clocks that have had non-concentric wheels. Both of them, for some reason, happened to be sessions, and they were the store regulated movements, like these little time only, just the little square movements is all they are. I thought I had a complete one in here, but I guess I finally broke them all down. Or just like this Waterbury, the little square movements, just time only. Both of them happen to be sessions, time only movements out of the store regulators. And I could tell something was wrong with them because customer said that their clock wasn't running right. Both of them just happened to be, they were dirty, needed to be serviced. They just had got to the point where they weren't working. But after cleaning them and doing everything, I put them back together, had them up on the wall test running, and was listening to it because at times I would listen to it and it would be out of beat, and I know I said it in beat. So I just sat there listening to them, and I got to listening, and I would hear I'd set it in beat, and I'd listen, and all of a sudden it would go out of beat for a few seconds, and it would go back into beat. And it would come back around, and it would go out of beat, and it would come back into beat. Well, I pulled everything back down, actually pulled the escape wheel off, put it in the lathe, and slowly started turning it, and that's when I noticed it was out of round. Fortunately, on movements like that, if you don't want to mess with doing this, or in the case of this one, it apparently had come from the factory that way because it was not bent at all. It was just like the entire thing was made out of round, like the center hole where it goes on the hub. Like here in his picture, if you look behind the pinion right here, that hub is actually what the wheel mounts onto. If you were to flip that over, well, in fact, you can probably see it on this one here. If you look at this one, let me bring the other camera up, that way you can actually see it. If you look at this one, you can see the 4 spot, or you should be able to see the 4 spots where it was punched, right there, 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 and there. Can you guys see that?
Mm-hmm.
What they do is they lay that escape wheel on that hub on there, and then they just take a punch. I don't know if it was a machine or somebody did it by hand, but they would just punch that on there, and it swells that brass out and locks that escape gear on, or the escape wheel onto the hub. Well, I'm assuming that at the factory, whenever they made those wheels, that hole was slightly off center, and the whole gear was not concentric to the arbor. In other words, it was kind of offset to one side. It wasn't perfectly centered. And so that's why it kept going in and out. The escape wheel was actually getting further and closer away from the verge as it was running. When it get to a certain spot, it was further, but then when it get around to the other side, it was closer, so it was throwing the whole thing out. 2 different movements, both sessions time only movements that did that. So on both of those, I mean, there really was no repair that I could do that I could foresee, come up with in my head. So I checked the, I don't know if it was Time Savers or Merritt's, one of the two had the replacement escape wheels, or they may both have them. But I think it's Time Savers has where you can buy the escape wheel by itself, or you can buy the escape wheel with a matched verge. So I just bought the escape wheel and the verge. That way I know they're matched up. I did the final finish on the verge, reinstalled everything, and boom, it ran like a top, stayed in B. So quick and easy. Well, I say quick, easy repair, just, time consuming, waiting for the part to show up and then having to swap the gears out and all that stuff. But it wasn't hard. It was just time consuming. So we're going to go back over to this. Is there any questions on what I've covered so far? I don't want to jump ahead if you guys have any questions on this stuff. Okay. So, okay, now this picture here, he's got what appears to be like a modeling clay. And what he's doing is he's taking the good section of teeth on his escape wheel and he's pressing it in and making like a mold. But what he's using it for is a template. So let's say, whoa, somebody's mic's coming back through mine.
Word?
I'm getting feedback from somebody's mic. I'm not sure who it is. Okay, now I'm not hearing. I kept hearing myself repeating back and forth on my end. But anyway, he's pressed it into this modeling clay or whatever it is, and he's made an impression of the good teeth. So what you can do is after you do that, let's say I had to go into this section right here and fix 4 or 5 teeth. Let's say something hit it right there and bent all those teeth up. If I want to make sure I have that pitch and that angle matched to the rest of the escape wheel, I can actually press the good side in that I know is still in good shape. Then I can take my repaired section around and match that up. And if it doesn't quite fit, I can make my adjustments and then make it to match the good section, using it as a template. We do the same thing when we're working on these woodworks movements with these wooden gears. Let's say I have one of these, and I don't think any of these have been repaired. No, these are all good. But let's say I have this wooden gear here, and I have a whole section of 3 or 4 teeth that are broken out. I'm going to do this exact function right here. I'm going to turn this around and go to the good teeth. I'm going to press it, use some kind of molding material, and I'm going to make a mold of it. And then I'm going to take epoxy and put a little bit of sawdust in it, mix that up, and I'm actually going to form it into that mold I just made using either the clay or some kind of molding material. Let that harden up, and then I can do just like a regular tooth repair. I can come in here and cut my section out, epoxy that new set in, and that will actually be stronger than the original gear, and it won't break. Bill Dugan was the one that taught me how to do that. So that's a handy little repair if you ever have to work on wood movements that have broken teeth. That's how you fix those. If you have access to this same kind of wood, the traditional proper way of doing it is just to cut a new section out of that wood, but that epoxy stuff works so great, you might as well use it. And if you use the right color of sawdust, or even get some Minwax or something and put in it and match that color up, if you do it right, you really won't even be able to tell you did a repair there. It might be a slight difference in the graining, but that'd be about it. I've seen some repairs on those. I mean, you had to actually get down there and look at it to even tell it was a repaired section on the wheel. They did such a good job on it.
Justin,
Sure.
John Tope has a class on fixing those wheels too, and he suggests, and I've fixed one wheel, and according to that, what you just said.
Yeah.
But he said to mix these 2 pigments in with the epoxy.
Mm-hmm.
And
what are
this
they?
one's a burnt umber and burnt sienna. And you just mix these in with the epoxy, and you can't. After I fixed it, I couldn't find it. I couldn't find where because the match was so good.
That's good.
It matched that cherry wood or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think it's cherry.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Perfect match, perfect color if you use both of these.
Cool. I'll have to remember that.
So
Is there a particular brand or what is it?
this is called Earth Pigments,
Earth Pigments. I'm going to write that down.
and the website is Earth Pigments, all one word, earthpigments.com.
Okay, earthpigments.com.
And
You said that was
the two colors are burnt sienna and burnt umber.
burnt sienna, burnt umber. Okay.
Which epoxy are you using, Keith, for that?
I only did it once. I did it like 4 years ago. I don't remember. It wasn't the quick. You can get quick drying epoxy, and you can get the slower stuff. And it's probably a good idea to use the slower stuff.
Yeah, don't use the 5-minute epoxy. Use the stuff that takes a little longer to cure. That way you can actually get it in there and do everything you need to do before it sets up on you.
Get the little bubbles out of it before
exactly. Well, that's good to know. I'm glad you had those pigments because I was, having to use like Minwax and some sawdust to put in it to kind of get it to match. But if those pigments worked for you, I'm gonna get some of that and start doing that with the Woodworks.
They work great. I was shocked at how good it looked.
Yeah.
First time. I'd never done it before, and it worked wonderful.
Yeah, the only pigments I've ever used is I've done the try to replace the gold leafing on like Woodworks clocks on the splat. They'd have like the eagle or some kind of fruit basket or whatever, and you go to Hobby Lobby or whatever, and it's mica pigment. That blends in pretty good, and you got to get the right color. This is a bronze, and then I've got a brilliant gold and a paradise pearl gold. And I find that the bronze really matches better than some of the other ones, but this works great for re-gilding or whatever they called it on the splat where it had an eagle or whatever, that painting looking, but it was the pigment. I usually, what I'll do is I'll take a stencil, and you can get, I think I've got them here. There's 2 books, or no, I actually borrowed those. Those were Hugh's. You can get 2 books that have stencil patterns in them from old early American shelf clocks. There's a blue book and a red book. One is the glass tablets, and the other one is like for the splats and the columns. If you find the pattern you want, if you know which one you're supposed to have, you find the pattern you want, you can copy that, or if you can just take it out of the book if you want. But whenever Hugh taught me how to do the stenciling, you just take tracing paper, trace out of the book. That way you don't tear your book up. And then you go over and just take a heavy, I thought I still had that stencil in here somewhere. I probably got it put up somewhere. Actually, I think I see it right now. Hang on just one second. Yeah. Of course, it's gotten ripped. I'll have to make a new one. But just traced it out and put it on this. Take an X-Acto knife, cut your pattern out. Then all you gotta do is just take the blue painter's tape it down, and you use some sort of, I just use like a spray adhesive to put down where the void is. And then that way, when you take a brush and you put the pigment over real light, it sticks to the adhesive. And then you can brush the excess away, and then your pattern stays there.
Nice. Can you include the information for those pattern books? Send it to us in an email or something?
Yeah, I can. I was going to show you where.
ISBN numbers would be good.
Oh, okay. Actually, I think you can honestly order it. They used to have it. Let me say that. Let me look and see if they still have it. I know Merit's had it, and I think Time Savers had them too. I don't have the current Merit catalog, otherwise I just pulled that one out. Let's see. 133. Well, I'm guessing they don't have it. They don't carry it anymore. Yeah, they used to have them in here, but I guess they finally stopped selling them. But yeah, I'll get you the info on it and send it in an email.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Merritt's may still carry it, but like I said, I don't have the Merritt's catalog to look. So back to the Escape. Oh, I wanted to show you what I just happened to see this when I was pulling the stencil down. We were talking, I think it was yesterday. I had showed you my bench and I had the little deal of glue to glue labels back down. I actually use that. You can get these through the parts catalogs. They're replacement labels for your clocks. So like this would be out of a Woodworks clock. In fact, I'll have to send you guys a picture of it, or I may bring it out here for tomorrow, or tomorrow night's class. I'll show you a clock I actually made. It's a pillar and scroll clock, and I put the replacement Henry Terry label in it because it's a Henry Terry movement that I put into the clock. So, but you can get those online too. And then even if you've got like a wall clock, a Seth Thomas or Waterbury, you can get a variety pack with a bunch of different labels. Pick out the one you want. And like I said, if it's a new replacement label like this, I just take Elmer's glue, watered down a little bit so it doesn't it's a little more manageable when it's watered down a little bit. It takes a little longer to dry, but I find that it works better. But if it's an old label, make sure you use non-acid glue or original hide glue and lay it back down. Like if you got a corner peeled up or some pieces that flaked off, that's what I would use. All right, so back to escape wheels. Okay, here he's got the escape wheel set up in his lathe. He's got the headstock and the tailstock, and then he's got his T-rest set up, and you can tell he's got just the smallest little gap right here. Now, the reason why he's got it set up this way is he's going to come in with a graver in this one, which I have some gravers down here. I'll show you. I've got a whole different selection of different size ones. I've got like that style. Here, I guess I could put it up on the other camera so you can actually see it. Wish there was a button where I could just switch back and forth between the two instead of coming down here to the bottom. Okay, so now those aren't ones I wanted to pull out. Disregard those. These are the ones I wanted right here. This is one that you can actually mount into a tool rest if you have like a Shoreline. That's one somebody made at some point. There's one that you'd have to put into like a pin vise or a wooden handle. But that's your most common graver that you're going to use is going to be that diamond shape right there. Like when I took my lathe class to the NAWCC, we actually made these and actually made the sharpener to sharpen these. I've got it here somewhere. I'll show you when we get to the lathe part. But that's the gravers we used in class to turn parts. But what he's doing is he's using a more flat style graver on his, and he is actually using that to do what we call topping the teeth. So what he's doing is we're assuming that he's already done the repair of pulling the teeth out. So obviously we're probably going to have different height on the teeth, because there's unless you're just really good, I guess, if you draw those teeth out, it's going to be really hard to match it to the teeth. Plus, you have a clock that's ran for 100 years or 50 years since it's last been in service. You got to figure that tooth's been rubbing and rubbing and rubbing and rubbing, so there's no guarantee they're all going to be the same height anyway, irregardless of damage or not. So what he's doing is he's taking that graver and he's coming in right there at the tip of that tooth, and he's just barely getting it to where it touches, and what it's doing, he's actually knocking material off the tip of the teeth and to where they're all uniform heights. I personally don't like doing it this way just because of a confidence issue of myself. I don't feel that I've got steady enough hands to do this method. The way I do it would be more like this. When I had my Shoreline, this would be how I would have done it. You'll notice he's got the tool in the tool rest. That way he can use the crank on the slide to just ease it in there, and it's a steady rest. It's not, you're not freehanding it. I don't have enough confidence to try to do this method freehand. Honestly, the easiest way I found to do it is I actually made a roller rest for my jeweler's lathe, and I'll take and set that up in the T-rest holder. Instead of having the T in it, I'll have that roller rest in there to where I can take a file and set the height right at the top of the wheel, and just take the file and file the tips down to where you can, if you go by the sound, you can tell when it's evened out. You know, you'll be able to hear the high spots, and then when the sound evens out, and you're not going to be doing very much with a file, you're just barely going to be touching it. And then once you hear that sound even out, then you're done. Now you may have to come back with a set of jeweler's files or some diamond files and bring a little bit more of a point to those teeth, because you will have a flat top. In fact, here in a couple of slides, you'll see under magnification the tip of one that's been filed off or been topped off. We'll have to go back and file it. But I'm more confident and more secure in my abilities to do it either this way or with the file if it's on the jeweler's rest. Like I said, when I had my Shoreline, I would do it this way because I had the slide with the tool rest and all that on it.
Justin, what does he have in the tailstock in terms of holding the pinion?
He's turning it on centers. It's like basically a dead center is what it is. I think the tip of it, if I remember correctly, is just slightly cupped, and the pivot actually goes into it. And he's using the collet to actually drive the gear, and that's basically just acting as a support on the tailpiece. In fact, when we get to the lathe section, when we start talking about polishing the pivots, I'll show you some of the attachments that he used and I use. You'll get an up close and better picture of what he used on this in that section.
I was wondering how that was done.
Yeah. Now this here is side by side. You can tell the one on the left, you can see that flattened out tip on that tooth. That's after he's gone in and topped it out. But one thing, I don't know if he put this in here intentionally or he just didn't catch it. I want you to look at this tooth right here. You see how that's slanted?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if these, in this frame here, he's fixed that one, or if this is a totally different tooth. But the first time I saw this slide, it caught my eye. So he may have included that in on purpose and then had this one as an after, I guess. But you can see that you want a tip. Of course, this one's not perfect. There's a little bit of a divot in right there. But you can see how thin that tip is compared to this one. Once we've topped the tips of the teeth, we're going to wind up with something like this. So then we're going to want to come in. See, that one's twisted. You can really see that. So I would assume that's probably that same tooth. He's just advanced it up one and shown that. But even that one's twisted. You can see that in the picture. So what you want to do to fix the thickness on the tip is come in with a small jeweler's file. In this case, I think he's using a small diamond file. And you want to just file both sides to get to thin that tip out, because you want to have as thin a tip as you can get, really. That way it's less drag on the face of the verge, on the pallet face. And then there would be the finished product. You know, before we started, we had those bends right there in the end of both of these, and he's got them straightened out, and it's all uniform now. Okay, so we're talking about escape. Is there any questions on the escape wheel part of that before we move on?